Hi all, I have an absolutely amazing game to show you today. This is from the TSAC Super Final Season 14, round 85 out of the 100 game match. D4 from Leela, the opening book given is very, very interesting. The same-ish Kings Indian defence. So F3, black castled. E5 is also another move, which actually has one of the very important stem games for this game in terms of a fantastic concept, which I don't want to say at the moment, but there was a fantastic game, Spassky against David Bronstein, that was played in Amsterdam 1956. Many regard David Bronstein as one of the uncrowned kings of chess, and he had a lot of fantasy ideas, superb creativity. His book, The Sorcerer's Apprentice, is well worth getting. So there's a very, very important stem game with E5, which leads to the same kind of idea that we're about to see. Black castled, bishop E3, E5. C5 is also an important move, theoretically, but here we test E5, D5, and now one of the perks of E5 is this queen can potentially go and use this diagonal. We see knight H5 with the idea now queen H4 check. And you might think, what's the point of queen H4 check here? So after queen D2, we have queen H4 check. If white, by the way, had played G4, then knight F4 should be okay for black. This kind of thing, black's going to get a very active bishop if white ever takes there. So this can be justified because a lot of the white pawns are on light squares. So this is nice for black. It's nearly equalizing. So we have queen D2, check, G3, and here is the point of the magnificent idea that black goes into what seems to be a very painful self-pin after knight takes G3, because isn't there queen F2? On bishop F2, by the way, then knight takes F1 is playable, hitting the queen, and that's good for black. But queen F2, yeah, this is Bronstein's queen sacrifice idea we're about to see now. Black plays the amazing knight takes F1, offering the queen, but grabbing both of white's bishops. So a fascinating position. Black is immediately now threatening knight G2 check, forking queen and king, and also hitting C4. So it's not just the two pieces. There's another pawn coming. White parries knight G2 with this. Knight takes C4, so a pawn as well. And this is the end of the book. A fascinating start position. Really dramatic imbalance. So we see now queen going back. Queen E1. In this position, rook C1 has been seen a bit before. For example, knight A6. The knight rerouting to E3. This seems quite interesting. And white may have a small edge. It's very difficult to evaluate these positions. So rook B1 is also kind of interesting. It's a very, very complicated imbalance to assess. So queen E1 has some perks behind it. One of the perks, the H pawn is free to roll, maybe create a form pawn. That's one of the perks. We see F5, very energetic. Knight takes B2 is a mistake. Queen C1 is a very, very strong move here after knight B5 hitting C4, and also knight takes C7 is on the cards, so that would be a big advantage for white. F5 very, very energetic, and in fact if F5 isn't played immediately, this is important theoretically. If something like this, it seems H4 might actually be more dangerous. This kind of thing looks as though, without black putting pressure on white's center, this looks as though it's more interesting for white than this immediate idea of F5 that was played. So we have H4, F takes E4, knight takes E4. On F takes E4 here, this allows bishop G4 check, and this is not very nice for white. Black's pieces are quite active, and there's pressure on E4 here. This is quite pleasant for black, with a big advantage potentially. So knight takes e4, making sure there's no bishop g4 check. But now this pawn has been a bit isolated, and we see it hit with c6. Queen d1 is played. On d takes, this really just activates black's pieces quite well, and in fact d5 here is very useful. This still breaks open this key diagonal, so it's too dangerous for white to enter this territory. It could end up getting in huge trouble and getting mated, as an example there. That's checkmate. So we see actually queen d1, bishop d7. The bishop prepares to maybe attack this f3 pawn. In fact, it seems Stockfish has a basis for coordination on f3 now. Knight takes b2 instead, too greedy. In fact, the knight's kind of trapped. Here, in fact, this is good. This is good and strong. Just winning the knight, of course. So bishop d7, king f2, bishop f5. Threatening, bishop takes e4 because of that pinned pawn. The knight goes back. Now knight takes b2 is safe enough here. The bishop can sometimes come in the game with e4 soon as well. We have queen b3, but one of the points is the knight can come back now with check. And into c5 just in time, hitting the queen and protecting b7. Queen d1. The bishop goes back. h5. Very, very complicated position. If d takes c6, this bishop is looking at f3. This kind of thing is quite pleasant. Black's got a massive advantage here, winning the queen. Basically, the queen looks like nearly trapped. In fact, there's only one move, and then it looks as though bishop f6 is trapping the queen. Let's actually put that on the board. So the queens can sometimes be totally run out of squares. So yes, white has to be careful about not taking on d6. So say this continuation here, yeah, we've seen. So queen takes d6 immediately. Also, this is just running into big trouble because of e4. The bishop's good at breaking down that diagonal. So Leela plays h5. This might not be a position which is really within Leela's training. So some of the openings do seem to favour Leela, and some of them might not from a theoretical perspective. Very dynamic and tactical position here, and very interesting imbalance. Knight a6, rook c1, rook f6 is played. Now here it does protect d6 explicitly. If rook f7, hg, white can potentially take on c6 to take d6. In this particular position, it's safe enough because yeah, it's just a slightly different position, and it's all of a sudden okay to take on d6. So we have rook f6, knight e2, and coordination on f3. This is a basis for black's coordination, this f3. We have h6. This kind of tries to shield the white king. If hg, rook takes, this is really dangerous on g3. For example, black can play for e4 and then bishop e5. And if white's forced to play something like rook c3, this is not very happy for white. So this kind of tries to shield the king in a way, but it is a liability form pawn in this particular case, it seems, especially after g5. That it's dropping off the board. So this actually starts to look like a miserable amount of pawns from the white perspective. Black is now 4 pawns up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 against 3. 4 pawns up. So still the 2 bishops for the queen, because both sides have 2 knights and 2 rooks. So the 2 bishops for the queen, but with the 4 pawns, that's quite a lot. If we consider bishops 3 each, 6 plus 4, like, yeah, it's quite a match for the queen. So rook f7, knight goes to c3. For a moment, it looks as though white's got a stable position, but with rook g6, there are imminent incoming threats like g4. D takes is played here, bishop takes. Rook c2, we have bishop g7. This is a very, very accurate move, as you'd expect. If g4, which looks maybe tempting, in fact, f takes is actually plausible for white. This position is plausible, with white actually making some inroads, and if d6 drops, white's actually getting an advantage. Rook d7 instead. This pressure on d6 is slightly unpleasant here, but nevertheless, g4, clear advantage to black. Yeah, this looks as though it's a viable alternative, rook d7. But, okay, in the game we have bishop g7, rook d2, bishop f8. So shielding, protecting d6 with this bishop. Knight takes d6. So a pawn sacrifice from Stockfish. What's the idea? Rook f4. It looks as though g4 and potentially doubling rooks on this g file. Extremely dangerous. Bishop takes d6 is no good. This position is just no good. It gives an advantage for white. White's overall better there technically. So rook f4, keeping a lot of tension in the position. And this piece is sometimes a liability now on d6. We have knight e2. On knight d e4, if the knight retracts here, knight c7, the knight, this can happen, for example, with g4. And white is getting undermined. e4 looks vulnerable here. This looks like a very dangerous position for white. Indeed, black has a big advantage. So knight e2, trying to discourage g4. But bishop a4, the very tactical bishop a4, supported by the rook. And this is questioned now, this knight on d6, as a tactical vulnerability. That's taken. Knight takes, g takes. So black has actually got two pieces there. What has actually happened? Sorry, black's given up a rook, basically. So given up one of the exchanges, but has a lot of pieces still for the queen. So even though it's like the exchange down for the two rooks, and it's 3 pieces for the queen, the thing is, this is another pawn towards the center, and white has, in a way, less resistance now in this position. After bishop c7, the rooks have no meaningful entry points. We have rook h2, knight d7, rook g1, and now bishop c6. Black coordination is very good here. Rook takes, h takes, queen h4. White is trying to do something with the queen and rook. On queen f2, this is just not going to do anything. Any passive defense. Yeah, black's going to be in the driving seat. So queen h4, just offering f3. So it's another pawn biting the dust. So yeah, quite a lot of pawns again. 4 pawns up, check. And now bishop h5, shielding h8 and h7. Queen e7, now knight ac5, rook f2. And here it's a very interesting, instructive moment. Even if it is the product of looking at millions of positions, it's kind of fascinating that Stockfish uses quite an amazing kind of positional tactical pawn sacrifice here. I wonder if you can guess what black plays in this position. If I give you 5 seconds. Okay, because it seems in a way black's got to actually be really careful. Knight f8, just offering e5. This helps untangle black and centralize more. As an example, if f3, then c5 is actually a target, especially with white having the possibility of a4, a5, and you see that c5 might drop off, and it might even be equal then. So knight f8, though, this pawn sack, and it's a central pawn, but white has limited resistance now with only rook and queen. Look at the black pieces now. Yeah, they're very, very powerful, and there's this dangerous passed pawn now on f4. c5 isn't such a big problem. Hitting the queen there, protecting things now. Rook c2, we have check. Now reinforcing c5. This is not so dangerous. The only thing is this pawn could be a threat. So let's see. King f6, a5, bishop f5, and now Leela sacks the exchange. Yeah, very interesting. These pawns are getting really dangerous. So yeah, this looks like a very difficult position in any case. If black had played b takes, then rook takes c5 here might actually be okay for white. So we have bishop f5 here, rook takes c5, b takes, queen a8, check, and the problem is this pawn is now really, really dangerous for white's king safety. So even though Leela's a pawn is a runner, some escape squares are now being cut off after bishop g3, and that leads to mating nets quite soon after, sometimes in chess. a7, bishop f5, and there's no time to queen this pawn here. Queen h1 is played. On queening the pawn, bishop d3 check, f2 check, and queening. This is just going to be good here, winning that queen, leaving black a load of material up. So this looks like very, very bad news now. Queen h1, check, knight d4, and it's kind of over. Queen h2 signifies it's really over. If white queens here, then coordination checkmates the white king, like that, for example. So yeah, this is over now. Queen h2, and here there's still mating net construction, so it's too dangerous to queen. We have king e1 and the game ended here. As an example, king e3 and then f2 check, f1 checkmate. So I have mixed feelings about this game, actually. Myself, I think it's an iconic idea in Bronstein's kind of repertoire of opening novelties and stunning innovation, this whole queen sac line. Actually, I'd like to give it a try in my Kings Indian games, to revisit the e5 with the idea of knight h5. It was featured in an article by Andrew Martin as well, years back, I remember, and a lot of analysis there. So I think the jury's out on this line. It's complicated and double-edged, especially as far as when humans play it. It could go either way. So a very, very interesting tactical game. And it shows a very interesting positional pawn sacrifice at one point to re-coordinate and energize black's pieces, not minding white queening the pawn if there's mating nets being constructed. So it's a battle of time there to try and get the mating nets. So yeah, very, very interesting in certain aspects, but maybe a little bit unfair to Leela's training. It's I think out of the scope of the bog standard training, this kind of mega novelty idea. Okay, if you enjoyed this game video, then please click on the top left box, play the YouTubers, and you can also test yourself on variations covered in this game from the improved menu, the puzzle books option, which has a link also to the annotated game. And I'll put maybe a sample of that in the addendum. Comments, questions, donations, see the description. Like, share, subscribe with the notification bell, really appreciated. Thanks very much. There is a puzzle book at Chess World. If you go to the improve menu, puzzle books, you'll find it. And you can actually just set, say, clear advantage and mates, and let's pick short ones, which are easier, so 1 and 10, between 1 and 10 moves. So here, black to play for a clear advantage as an example. There was a knight fork tested, knight g2, then we win the queen. So that's an easy one, and we can carry on. So just apply the filter you would like, white or black, number of moves. So here, white to play for a clear advantage. I think it was queen b1 looks good, or not. Nope, I've already forgotten. Queen c1, yes, for knight b5. So the knight goes there, then knight b5. And then we can play knight takes c7, so there's a backfire on that c file. Okay, white to play for a clear advantage. Here, it looks as though queen b3 is very strong. We can either potentially take the knight. I think there was an even stronger idea. Knight takes d6 as well, but I think taking the knight is good. but knight takes d6 is also an alternative there. Here, black to play, I think, plays bishop takes c6. And e4 here? No, not quite. Maybe knight a6 offering d6. And then this is... Actually, there's a lock and key around the queen here on queen e7, bishop f6 as mentioned. So you get the idea. You can test yourself on the variations we covered in the game video. I hope you enjoy that as well. Check that out at Chess World. Thanks so much.